welcome back to another episode of Fully Booked. I'm Meaghan.
I'm Arthur.
And it's the second week of, what is it, Sci-Fi month this month?
Sci-Fi month, the best month.
The only month you're going to have. This is like a fucking fish out of water month for me. I feel like this entire month I'm going to be like completely out of my depth, and then that will be you for the rest of the time.
Great.
That you're here.
I'm looking forward to that.
It's going to be good. This is how you'll be happy this month, and then the rest of the time you can just be used to how I'm feeling right now, which is just we're talking about science fiction and I don't know anything about it. Okay, I have a confession. We were supposed to watch a different movie for this week.
Didn't work. It's a great movie, but
I don't know. I don't know how to feel about it. So okay, fine. So full confession time, we were supposed to watch Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy for
Classic.
This week's episode and then talk about it. And we watched it, and I will also confess I'd never seen it before. I think I might have seen bits and pieces of it here and there, but I'd never actually sat down and watched the whole movie before, which I know a lot of people are gasping. And we watched it, and I liked it, but I also didn't really feel like I had very much to talk about, really, which again, I'm sure I'm going to get people being like, oh my God, you're so fucking stupid. You didn't read more into it. It's not really about that. Again, this is just like out of my depth. So I get to a point where like, unless it really gets into some like heavier themes, I don't really have anything to talk about.
yeah, I mean, I think it had some more heavier themes, I guess, but it's a lot of it like existentialism and what it is to be human and have where is your home and everything, which is kind of like relates a little bit to what we're going to be talking about today.
But it also just kind of explained itself. And then the movie was done. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's one of those movies where we can talk about why is the answer to the ultimate question 42.
Yeah,
that would be a great
I'm
episode.
sure people have entire podcast episodes about that
100%.
already. But anyway, whatever. It doesn't matter. We kind of decided to go in a different direction and make things easier for me. But it also gave us an opportunity to watch like a newer release, which is fine.
Yes.
Which we hadn't gotten around to doing.
And it's a great one.
Yeah. So this week we're talking about The Wild Robot, which was released just this past summer, I want to say. Am I crazy?
Something like that.
Is that when it came out? Wait. Oh, sorry. Released on September 27th, apparently.
Yeah, just after summer.
2024. Yeah, that's it. So at the moment, obviously, I'm going to preface this with, just in case you haven't seen it, since it's a newer one, big spoiler alert, obviously, because we are going to talk about like the major plot points and the themes and everything. So The Wild Robot is actually the first in a trilogy of books by an author by the name of Peter Brown, who wrote and illustrated all three of the books as well. First novel was released in 2016, the follow-up in 2018, and then the third book in 2023. Huh. Yeah, and so this is also turning out to, at least as far as we can tell so far, being the first book in the series and the first movie in the series, because they have announced that they're making a second movie as well that's going to follow the plot of the second book, basically.
That's awesome. That's great. And apparently, from what I understand, is that he also collaborated on the movie. So he was an advisor on it. So
like a consulting something.
Yeah, which is awesome when authors get involved in that, because it really just shows, and because they're able to collaborate on it, they can get more out of the book than just a screenwriter who would adapt it.
Yes, so. But you do. I will say, much of the time, you need both.
Of course.
You need both, because I know a lot of the time, like, authors are incredible at doing what they do, but then they go into like translating that to a screenplay. It's not as easy as you think it is.
Are you talking about Overdrive?
No, Maximum Overdrive was like a short story though. And also like, I'm not talking about people who are like on cocaine. I just mean like in general, you see it every once in a while. Like there are adaptations of some things that the author actually writes the script for,
right. And
you watch it and you're like,
it doesn't always translate to screen.
Exactly,
There's too many things you want to put in there because you want to expand on the story, and then it just doesn't work.
Or they're doing too much of almost like a direct adaptation.
Exactly.
Sometimes the adaptation needs to be the word, like the main word that you use, right?
Adapt.
That's it, to actually adapt it so that it can be compressed into like a 2-hour-ish film, let's say.
Yeah.
So at the time that we are recording, The Wild Robot currently has an 8.2 out of 10 on IMDb and 97% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, and it was nominated for a bunch of Golden Globes, and I don't remember if it won any because it just passed.
Yeah, it was nominated for animated feature. I don't think it won, actually. I believe it, but it was in contention, and I get the feeling it's going to be one of those. It's probably nominated for an Oscar animated feature as well. So brief overview. I don't want to get too much into like every single detail from the movie, but basically the brief overview is that the first film follows a robot, which is a Rosum 7134, which are basically a what?
39?
No, 7134.
Okay.
I think.
I trust it.
Yeah. Oh my god. Okay, now you're making me question myself. Yes, Rosum 7134. She's part of a fleet of basically like helper AIs, pretty much, that are created by a company called Universal Dynamics. They're being transported on a cargo ship, and obviously whenever there's a storm or something, and one of the like containers gets like sort of washed off the boat and onto the shore of this uninhabited island. So there are no human beings living on this island at all, and all the other robots were damaged. All the other Rosum units are damaged, but 7134 is fine and essentially undamaged, other than like some like internal stuff here and there, and like her transmitter's a little funky. So she's stuck on this island, and because they're programmed to always accomplish tasks, she accidentally becomes a surrogate mother to a tiny gosling that hatches in her hands after she, spoiler, accidentally kills its family. Because she falls down a big mountainside and she hits the nest that he's in with his siblings and stuff that are all also unhatched, and the mom.
Yeah, the movie has a lot of dark humor, which we're going to touch upon during this discussion, but this is one of those instances. I mean, that part wasn't funny, but it was one of those dark moments where you're like, whoa.
But you were like, oh, God, because like she like lifts a wing and you're like,
the
bird's dead, God. So it's a goose, it turns out. And anyway, there's only one egg that made it through that. And he hatches and like imprints on her immediately because she's the first thing that he sees. So he thinks that she's his mom. And of course her task, quote unquote, then because it's explained. So she learns the languages of the animals while she's there because she needs to understand how to communicate with them. And she's an AI, so she's able to do that, basically like study and then take some time to learn over, I guess, there's a time lapse of like weeks, whatever. And then since she's able to communicate with them now, the animals kind of inform her that like this gosling now thinks that you're its mother and you have to help it, because by the time the migration rolls around in X number of months, he needs to be able to swim and fly to go on that really long, obviously, migration flight that geese go on every year. So she basically finds herself with her task, but over time kind of evolves and changes her own programming and circumvents a lot of that, to a point where she develops like actual feelings and love for this gosling and for other animals in the forest as well, who she communicates with and spends time with. It's so cute.
It's very fun. There's a lot of emotional scenes. There's a couple of times I almost shed a tear. Maybe I did one, but anyways.
I did. I cried like 3 times. I was like, oh God, this is so cute.
I mean, so the whole thing, while we were watching it, I was thinking of like those scenes that were very emotionally packed and everything. Yeah. Part of it was the scene, but I really have to give it to the composer, because the score, for me at least personally, was so good and so moving that those scenes just stood out. And it made you feel things, but a lot of it, I think it was due to the music.
I think that it was a combination, I guess for me, of the score and like the animation itself, because we were talking about this even during the movie. I was like, why is it that she's like, even at the beginning when like they call her Roz, and when Roz is searching for someone to like give her a task to accomplish, she looks so disheartened.
Yes.
But like she doesn't have facial expressions. She's a robot, but it's still, you feel her being so disappointed that she doesn't have a task to accomplish. And we were saying that, we were like, how did they do that? And you were just like, it's the animators and like body language.
It's body language and the voice acting also. They have a really great cast in this movie.
Yeah, the cast is really great. Roz is voiced by Lupita Nyong'o. She befriends a fox that lives in the forest called Fink.
Yeah, who's Pedro Pascal. Yeah, amazing.
Brightbill is voiced by Kit Connor, who anybody who's watched Heartstopper on Netflix, which is super popular, and another adaptation of graphic novels, actually, will be familiar with. And there are a few others as well. There's a big grizzly bear that lives in the woods that's voiced by Mark Hamill.
Yeah, and the main Goose. The main goose who leads the pack is Bill Nye. Yeah, so they have a great cast.
Longneck, she names... Fink teaches her to like name things properly, so she names the Gosling Brightbill, and that becomes his name as the character throughout the rest of the movie. And yeah, it's just, I guess it's just like a good, I mean, overarchingly, like, yes, like it's really beautiful to watch. The animation is lovely. The score, like you mentioned, is very good. The voice cast obviously is very good as well. But I think a lot of, I guess, what makes it good and what made it really popular too, this did really well at the box office, and critically it was very successful. I think a lot of what made it good also was just a lot of the themes, which definitely come from the original story.
For sure.
And from Peter Brown's original That's It story. It's difficult. I think it's more difficult than a lot of people realize to write children's and young adult like literature and properly convey messages about certain things that might become important to kids, you know,
with certain heavy themes as well, right? So there's like
to speak about them honestly, but also in a delicate sort of way to an extent, and not just be like, things are dead. Although some of the humor in this movie is very much like, things are dead, and you're like, whoa. It
was, some parts were very dark humor. It was absolutely hilarious, but also you're like, whoa, maybe I should not be laughing at this. But it did work out. I mean, some of those moments were kind of like, when the whole thing happened with the possum.
Oh my god, okay, yeah. So
we laughed like no tomorrow.
I shouldn't laugh, but I laughed.
Yeah, it was very dark, but then it turns out to not be what we thought it was, so that was a fine thing. There were a couple of scenes, because there's a huge spoiler again, giant snowstorm, and there's a couple of animals from that forest that do die. Yeah. So there's that. I mean, that's not funny, but there's just some dark themes in there.
The darker themes that you see, that's it, like look like the family of geese that are killed at the beginning. Yeah. Unfortunately, again, as the migration is happening, at one point Longneck is killed. He doesn't make it to the end either. So, you know, those are like, that's it. There are death and grief and other like topics like that are covered. I think some of the major themes in the story are those of otherness.
Yes.
You know, so not fitting in and not feeling like you've found your place in the world, or not feeling like you belong.
And finding that place.
Yes, and then finding your own place, even if it doesn't seem to fit the norm or you're like, you don't fit the expectations of society.
You don't fit your programming, like it was for the case of Roz, right?
For Roz, it's her programming, or for, some of the other animals, it could be their instincts, like whatever, you know, the situation might be. And then there are obviously a lot of themes of like found family. So, you know, that a lot of the times, like for people, their birth family isn't necessarily the people that they're closest to. They can find kind of other close friends and kind of people who become your family along the way, basically. And you don't have to look the same, act the same, be the same, or come from the same background for that to be. And
you can still learn similar things that you would learn with, I guess, your original family through someone else.
Yeah, like it's like Brightbill, obviously, throughout the course of this, yes, like they do help him learn to swim and to fly and to fend for himself. But he also, at the beginning, because he's been with Roz for a number of months, he like makes robot noises while he's walking, and like before he answers a question, or the way that he responds to things has a very computer sort of quality to it, which is very funny for a while, and he kind of drops it eventually, but it was pretty funny when he started doing it. And what other themes are there that we were talking about? Oh yeah, that's it. Finding your strengths. That's it. Found family versus your born family.
And just preconceived notions of what others think you should be versus what you decide to become yourself. That was mainly for the case of Roz.
Yes.
but
because she chooses to change her programming.
Exactly. Yeah. Choose to change her programming, choose to become someone who accomplishes more than a task and then just gives up. Because at one point she essentially says that her task is infinite and almost impossible, right? So it's kind of like a infinite loop of continuing. I mean, that also ties into the whole parenthood. There was a lot of parenthood themes discussed in there.
Right? Like
exactly.
That's part of the whole thing, is that you never really stop being a parent, even if when your kids grow up, when they leave, whatever the situation might be, you are always their parent. It's not, yes, your relationship might shift to a degree, but it never like goes away. It's not like you're suddenly not their parent.
Exactly.
Of course you are, you know?
And even after they leave, which happens in the movie, she still decides to stick around, and she still, searches for, or not searches for, waits for Brightbill. And then even after that, after they do come back, there is other things that happen, I guess, a denouement of the movie that happens. And, there's, again, protecting your child, or you're not your real child, but someone you consider as your child, it's
sometimes means stepping away from them to a certain extent and stuff. And that's it. There's a lot of that sort of towards the latter third of the story. But it was, I mean, there's a lot of that stuff. And then also it's interesting too, because when you they approach it in a different way, but we were talking about it, and I feel like the movie has a very sort of similar quality to like WALL-E.
Yes.
In a way. Yes, I get it. Like, okay, yes, it's sci-fi and the robot's the main character, but it's not just that.
But there's other sci-fi elements into it.
Yes, exactly. That's it. And it's a little bit less like WALL-E. The central story kind of revolves around what human beings have done to the planet and the dystopia that exists. Like, that's a major part of the story. I would say in Wild Robot, it takes a little bit more of a back seat, but it's still there, and it's something that is
see in certain scenes.
It's something that's only realized because the geese do go on their migration, of course,
and you follow them.
You follow what happens to them while they're trying to make it, and you're only given certain things from like exterior shots to an extent. But the first thing that popped out that you pointed out, that at first I was kind of like, what the hell am I looking at right now? That you were like, oh shit, was they fly over the Golden Gate Bridge, but the Golden Gate Bridge is completely underwater.
Yeah.
So we're just given to understand that obviously climate change and a lot of human factors have contributed to probably a lot of sort of formerly inhabitable parts of Earth becoming uninhabitable, and people having to move to other things. And that's part of what this universal dynamics, overarching kind of supervillainy type of thing off to the side exists for, because of course they've invented these robots that take care of everything for you, so you don't have to, you get more downtime and you don't have to worry about this, which like that reminded me of WALL-E, because I was like, right, because they've got robots that do everything for you. So everybody's lazy, can't walk anymore because they don't have to do anything for themselves.
And on WALL-E, all of them live on a ship, so it's a confined space, and in this case they're all living in giant domes, like cities that are covered in domes. So again, speaks to the same thing, that humanity just secluded themselves to one place, and they're making those robots to do everything for them so they can enjoy their free time, whatever it is.
Exactly.
But the outside world is suffering because of climate change, because of whatever it is, except, which is something that we've discussed afterwards, except for that island with the animals.
Yes.
They're totally fine. They have a thriving community. There's plenty of food for everyone. There's a lush forest. Exactly.
People have left them alone.
Exactly.
And have not gone to the island. So.
Yeah. And the climate change did not affect them as much.
No.
Because there was no human presence there at all.
Exactly. That's it. And so, and to a degree, even with like, yes, some of the harsher conditions and things like that in certain cases, yes, of course, as is commonplace, some animals won't make it through certain seasons and things. And if food is scarce and stuff, but if that island, whatever it is, has largely just in general been left alone, there is no reason that the animal communities there won't thrive, right? I mean, like, look at something, like, it's weird to see, but, like, we've seen it, like, a couple of times. Like, we saw a little bit of weird shit during the pandemic, whales popping up in, like, basins and stuff. That was strange. And that was just a number of months, let alone years, decades, however long this has been, which is probably a very long time, because if they're well established in their colony that they exist in now, like, it's probably been quite a while since whatever this is began to happen. And, I lost my train of thought, damn it. I had a good one, too, that I was thinking of for something. But anyway, just, like, the idea of, like, that area, either that maybe it was inhabited at some point, now it isn't, although there's no indication, like, there's no decaying houses anywhere.
No, there's nothing there.
Or anything to, like, give that impression. but like, that animals themselves like will thrive as long as they're left alone.
Nature will just thrive. That's what it is. Nature survives.
It's like, sorry, I just thought of it. It's like what we've seen and what cameras have picked up in Chernobyl. It's been X number of decades. There are wild horses and different animals that have just made their home there. Because it hasn't been inhabited since the late 1980s. So ever since, like, the nuclear disaster that happened there. Obviously, humans can't return, but there are, animal species that have just begun to return to the area. There's lush vegetation that has grown.
Nature will adapt. Same thing as in this movie. Roz adapts to her environment thrives and survives.
The animals adapt to her eventually too. I mean, it does also, like, obviously part of this too. Is part of the stuff with Brightbill is also that he was what would be considered the runt of the litter, basically. So we're given to understand to an extent that, like, her showing up and becoming his surrogate mother like this is more of a positive thing for him, because there's nothing to say that, like, he wouldn't have eventually fallen behind with his regular family and maybe been left behind and not made it to the point.
Exactly, because he had, like, smaller wings and it was harder for him to fly.
He's that's it. He's little. He's not quite as strong as, like, a regular goose is the majority of the time. So, like, that's kind of the understanding, and that's a conversation that's had. Like, Longneck confirms that and stuff. Yeah. That he wouldn't necessarily have made it through. So he needed her. She needed him. All of those things. And yeah, that's it. Like, the relationship that they form, and not even just them, like the relationship that she forms with Fink is great, who becomes like sort of like an uncle brother, I don't know, whatever, something sort of along those lines. And also, because again, these are all different people, different creatures, whatever you want to call them, who have experienced the otherness and discrimination and bullying based on who they are. In Fink's case, because everybody thinks that a fox is always going to do something wily. That's it. Brightbill, it seems weird to them because he lives with the quote-unquote monster, because they don't know what a robot is, obviously. And Roz, of course, is like a big scary metal thing, so they have no idea what to do about her other than run away, which is normally what they do.
Between three of them, there's a lot of bullying aspect that is discussed and is overcome as well. Yes. With their action and how they interact with the other animals and kind of the things that they say. So that was actually a really great message.
Yeah, it was really
that
nice.
I loved.
That's it. And like, the geese do like accept him eventually. Like, there's a whole aspect of that and stuff that comes through, which is really cute. And then you do have kind of an, that's it, like a sort of, again, like it's like the sci-fi sort of elements other than Roz herself aren't necessarily like a massive part of the story that's in your face in the same way that you'll see with something like WALL-E, but they do come through in an evil overlord sort of way because of like eventually the Rosam units that all went missing, they do have like transponders on their heads or whatever, tracking beacons, and she had turned hers on at some point. So eventually Universal Dynamics does send
recovery units,
a recovery fleet basically to pick her and the other units up. And they're, run by this like little tentacle robot. She's so mean. She's terrifying because she says really scary things, but she's like smiling in her voice while she says it. And she's just like, everything will be great. Come with me.
She's neutral.
Allegedly. She calls her, the way she describes it was really funny because it's something like, morally neutral with no feelings or something. It was just very funny the way that she delivered the line.
But realistically, she was chaotic neutral, so that's a little bit different.
She was a chaotic neutral because as soon as somebody says they're not doing what she wants them to do, she gets really mad. So.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we get kind of like that aspect of things, and then that's it. Basically, by the end, what winds up having to happen is that Roz has to make the decision that even though the island is where she wants to be right now, because the Universal Dynamics won't stop like looking for her, trying to get to her, that for now it is time for her to go and maybe, hopefully find a way back once she's able to figure out, what to do and how to get back to her actual family now. Yeah. It's so cute.
It was really good.
I loved it.
And also I found it very interesting that island, like we mentioned, was always thriving and doing totally fine until parallel to human intervention happened, and then all hell broke loose.
Yeah, there's a fire.
It burns down half of the island, and that only happened because there was, again, human or partial human intervention.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is, again, an interesting parallel that maybe the author was trying to say, or the movie was trying to say, that everything we touch, we end up destroying it.
Yeah,
in certain aspects.
That
is a dystopia aspect of things, right?
And particularly like nature, that, the negative things that occur are really a result of humans as a rule almost all the time. Because even if you're like, oh, well, like, it's not like anybody's starting the forest fire. We created the climate change that's starting the forest fires much more frequently now and setting off like other chains of events and things. So no matter what, trace it back far enough and it's our fault, really, more than anything. So yeah, that's it. So it's just, I guess hopefully it also kind of sends a message that like sometimes there are some places that don't need to be developed, that we can just leave alone so that nature can do what nature does and it can thrive on its own without having to have a bunch of other people around and stuff to intervene.
Regardless, it will. While we're here, it's going to adapt and it's going to do it after we're gone.
Yeah.
So...
And honestly, like, if anything does, if we think about it, if anything, any major, like, sort of, that's it, events like this occur and all of this climate change and all of that, even this movie points out where they're like, oh, so many places are uninhabitable now and things like that, that'll be an inconvenience for us. It won't be as much of an inconvenience
That's true.
for other creatures
That's very true.
The world.
Well, we're having some very morbid introspective here.
Listen, I will say, genuinely, there's so much that's funny in the movie, like very funny, like, just like very. I mean, obviously, in the same way that most. I mean, like, in the same way that we used to get like enjoyment out of films as kids will enjoy it, but then they're doing the smart thing that they do, where a lot of the jokes are also for the parents.
Yes,
like there's a possum. Voiced by Catherine O'Hara, who's great. And she has all her little babies on her back all the time. And she's trying to have a conversation with Ross to explain what moms do.
Right.
And she says, she's like, listen, at least you only got one as the mom of 7 babies. And then you hear like a growly something off to the side. And one of the babies screams. And then she just pauses and goes, 6 babies. And you're like, oh my God. And I burst out laughing because I didn't know what else to do. And I was like, oh, that's terrible.
That was a terrible, but also a funniest scene in the movie.
Yeah, but also the baby's not dead. It's fine. They made a joke, and then the baby comes back. He's like, Mom, I'm fine. And she's like, great. But there are like a couple of scenes like that. There's a baby bunny who's very morbid a couple of times. It's like, trying not to die. And you're like, whoa. But it's like, it just adds to the humor so that everybody watching it has a good time. And those are the better ones. Those are the better animated films in general, are when all ages of people watching it find it funny.
Yeah, and especially when you can rewatch it again. If you're younger now, then you rewatch it in 10 years from now, you'll find it funny in a different way.
Like, that's how they used to make Disney movies.
Yes.
That's how the Disney movies used to be, is that, like, you would get older, and because there were all of these jokes that you didn't understand. And
it was just a lot of euphemisms and adult jokes that you didn't get as a kid, but then you're like, whoa.
And you would get
that's
older,
a Disney movie?
And you were like, oh, like, yeah, that's it. So there would be, like, euphemisms about things, or there would be, like, even just, like, clever little jokes in the script. What was Shireen telling me? Oh, yeah. It's true. She pointed this out, and it's true. It took me forever to realize that. I don't think I realized it until, like, probably, like, the 15th time that I watched Hercules. But there's a scene in that movie where the Pain and Panic are pretending to be little kids trapped under a rock, and Hercules has to save them, blah, blah, doesn't matter. But people are like, oh no, my friend's trapped under a rock, somebody help, or whatever, and blah, blah, blah. And one of the kids goes, somebody call IXII. And I was like, what? And it took me ages to realize that it's like the Roman numerals for 911.
Oh, yeah.
So they were like, somebody call IXII. And it's like a throwaway line in the film, but when you know what it means, you're like, oh my God, that's funny. And it's just little clever things like that. And this movie has some stuff like that I guarantee if I were watching it as like a 10-year-old, I would have no idea what it meant. Not. But give me like another like 5-6 years and I would have been like, ha, 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 ha. Great. I loved it. I'm really happy that this was the first science fiction movie we were talking about.
Science fiction adjacent, sure. It wasn't any kind of hard sci-fi, but
adjacent. It counts. That's fine.
Sci-fi themes.
It's fine.
It was a sci-fi movie for Meaghan.
That's what it was. It was the best kind of sci-fi movie for me. Okay, next week is fine. Next week we're going to talk about some more stuff in like actual science fiction literature that's not just for the children or the youngins, you know?
That's
and we'll
right.
be able to get into maybe some more principles with that, which will be you taking the lead on that front because I'm not going to do it.
Can you give us a little sneak peek of the theme?
We're going to talk a little bit about we're going to get into a little bit about, I guess, maybe some harder science fiction to an extent, but also kind of the influx of like how sci-fi is really taking a turn where we really like practical heroes who are able to, and like protagonists who are able to like actually use certain principles or, you know, are able to get out of situations in science fiction literature by like being practical about stuff and using actual maybe scientific principles to do so or to explain what's going on. I'm looking at you, 3-body problem. I don't know what any of that means.
It was great.
So we're going to talk about that a little bit and probably try to get into that a bit more because you have a lot more knowledge of that than I do just based on like the reading that you've done and like the stuff that you're kind of aware of in that sphere. So that'll be like a really interesting, I'm going to have to do some research before we record that episode because I have no idea what we're going to talk about. We'll figure it out. Yeah. And then before the end of the month, we're going to talk about some box office bombs. It's going to be great.
Oh yeah.
I'm excited.
Because we're watching them too, so.
Exactly. That's it. So I'm looking forward to that. Anyway, until that time, obviously feel free to, you know, continue to check out the website, fullybooked.ca. You can sign up for the newsletter there too. So every week you'll get just a little bit of content that we're putting out and that all of our contributors are putting out on the site. And you can obviously also feel free to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Blue Sky. I remember it from now on at fullybookedca. But until next week, guys, keep on reading.